So what were you saying about Mott?
These only throat gates. And then these two ring of what? No return? Ring of no return. These are the two logic Mott throat gates.
Okay, yeah, because we're playing this game of what do particular gates have as commonalities based on what amino acid they share. And it's this interesting question. So we have what Richard Rudd calls the ring of no return. And this is gate 31 and gate 62. And 31 being Rachel's personality son. So we were kind of asking, what do these two have in common? So they're both logic, they're both throat gates, they're both Mott, they're both the godhead of Mott, and they would be next to each other except they have a stop codon in between, gate 56. The stop codons don't code for any amino acids, so they don't actually produce something, they just simply stop. They're the punctuation. So yeah, looking at the position in the body graph then, 62 to 31, both in the throat, and what Rudd calls the ring of no return. So let's see what he means by that. The amino acid is tyrosine. And then Rudd says about tyrosine and about this ring, this mysteriously named codon ring, the ring of no return, refers to the evolutionary process that takes place when higher consciousness reaches the throat center in human beings. The throat center is where the greatest human initiation occurs. This is the great leap from the fourth causal body into the fifth Buddhic body. Once you begin to speak your truth and the higher involutionary currents begin to use your voice to transmit their truths, there is no return. At this point, you have broken away from the lower realms forever, taking the leap from worship to embodiment. So, pretty deep way of trying to understand that. Let's see what Ra has to say about tyrosine. There are a number of materials Ra did, actually even working with Richard Rudd on, well, I guess Rudd transcribed some of Ra's lectures on amino acids. But the Rave codon mapping materials from Ra, he really talks about each amino acid and what he associates with that. So let's look at tyrosine here. I'm not seeing it. I guess it's not. Trying to search. These are alphabetized at least, which is nice. So let's see if Ra talks about tyrosine. Yeah. Okay, so this is Mott, and Mott has, I see, so the Godheads really associate to the amino acids in some significant way, for the most part. Going through these, he at least, although some of them cross over, but, or at least the Terminators do. But what he says of Mott, 31, 62, 33, and 56, that 33 and 56 are Terminators, 31 and 62 code to tyrosine. So he says the 31st gate is the gate of influence, part of the channel of the alpha, leadership for good or bad, and the only thing that actually has influence are facts. The 62nd gate, preponderance of the small, the gate of detail. So the only thing that we are designed to be influenced by are facts. It's really showing the gate of influence and the gate of facts are both ultimately the same amino acid. They both code for the same thing in the world. So we're here to be influenced by facts, and we are not here to be influenced by anything else. Chemically, this relationship is very profound. And more than that, what's so interesting is facts create influence. Not that influence is rooted in facts, but facts create influence. People who arrive at certain facts suddenly become influential. So that's an interesting idea, like a scientist or something. You learn a certain thing, or you arrive at a certain fact. And when you
start spewing facts,
yeah, and then you suddenly are influenced.
Influential.
That regardless of what the abstract process may be, what we call the human wave, regardless of the feelings and desires and the emotional waves, the only thing that we are really here to be influenced by is fact. Yeah, it's logic. So, The moment the facts are there, the moment we can take in the facts, then that influence had its effect, and then we become forces for that influence. We kind of carry along that influential, like that's how influence works. You get people on your side, they're won over by the facts, and then they become agents of that same movement. This is all about collective leadership in the world. It's one of the most important themes that we have because all of us are dependent on the collective to provide us with the assurances that we need, that the pattern is safe, so we need to be assured that the pattern is safe, that buses are going to run on time. These are the things, this is part of what's breaking down now, in fact, with the end of the cross of planning. Although that only has 9 and 16, it's the internalization theme where we find the 62. Okay, so yeah, it's saying, he's basically saying this is the influence of logic kind of on the world, being these logic throat gates, so it does very much fit. So yeah, very different description than Rudd's ring of no return. I mean, I would really like to do raw keynoting for these, where we say, okay, tyrosine is the ring of factual influence, or something, right? The ring of influential facts. And so it kind of is this way of understanding what...
Or look up really what tyrosine does for your body.
Well, that's the next question. Yeah, let's do it. So what does tyrosine do?
But you can also kind of hear in raw stories how there's no going back from having the facts. When something is established,
There's no going back. Oh, it's the point of no return. It's like once the fact hits, it's the point of no return for, there is a point of no return where...
Cat's out of the bag.
Where it's had its mark on the world.
Yeah.
It's had its mark on the world, and it's influenced people. And so once people are influenced, it's kind of like you can't fight the wave.
Right.
Like trying to fight against. I mean, that's the thing. Trying to influence public opinion. It's like someone is embarrassed publicly and has a whole fiasco, and they're trying to influence public opinion, but they can't. Once the facts have become known about them, like you're saying, that's the point of no return.
Or 62 names, right?
Naming things in the mental maya.
Yeah, so once they exist by that name, that's their
it.
name. Yeah.
That's it.
You're always there's that that joke, the dirty Scottish joke. Seamus goes. Okay, I gotta do it now. So he goes, I'll think of the less blue way to put it punchline. So this guy goes to visit his Uncle Seamus, and he's never been to Ireland, to his homeland before. So Seamus says, well, I want to show you the town. You see that bridge there? I built that bridge with my own bare hands. But do they call me Seamus the bridge builder? Nah. And he goes, you see that well? I dug that well with my own hands. Do they call me Seamus the well digger? But you have sex with one goat. The fact is there.
Yeah.
People are influenced, and that's what they call Seamus.
Right.
So they're not gonna, they're not gonna remember him as the bridge builder. Well, yeah. So this is an interesting little ring here, codon ring, and then tyrosine. What it actually does, it's an essential component for the production of several important brain chemicals, neurotransmitters including epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So it literally helps in the production of those things. So it'd be interesting to think about how I lead, and then what is the voice of 62?
I don't remember.
Oh my god, now we gotta look it up.
I name.
Is it? I don't think, it might as well be. It might as well be.
Is it opinions? Is it?
Oh yeah.
But what is it? It just says I think.
I
So
think.
it just says I
Yeah.
think. I think this. I think that.
That's good.
Also, when I read Gene Key 31, because that's my design son, he was talking about the relationship between 62 and 31, and he was saying that those leaders who had the greatest influence, because 31 is the gate of influence, know how to master language, which is 62.
Can people hear what she's saying on a remote? Is it too quiet? Because I can repeat it too. I don't know because she's across the room. But she was saying that the leaders, and you're also all more than welcome to speak. You're on speakerphone or speaker.
I could hear her really well.
Oh, you can hear very well?
Yeah, I could hear the whole conversation. Yep.
I'm so glad. I know I'm sitting a little close, so if I'm too loud, let me know. I can skip back.
You're the
But
influencer.
I'm glad that it's picking it up, though. We've always tried to get the audio going.
Yeah, interesting. We all have 31,
Yeah,
41
I know.
in every
Across,
Yeah, cross of the alpha here, and unexpected
and alpha.
alpha. Yeah, so 2 alphas and an
interesting.
unexpected, all who have 31 in there.
So we all have this
Incarnation
codon.
cross.
But it's your personality both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personality Earth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that we're switched. The winter.
They're
the
Leo
summer.
Leo and Aquarius, versions of it. Well, so yeah, I guess that some relationship to dopamine production, and I guess people, like, why do people endlessly post on YouTube and Reddit and things? Because it gives them dopamine, and
Well,
that's the
I was reading
use
about
of
dopamine today, actually, and actually what happens is it's the search is what increases dopamine. It's not actually getting the reward.
Oh, funny.
Then once you get the reward, it actually plummets.
Wow.
because you got
Oh,
it.
you need to search
Yeah,
again.
and then then like the bar is set higher for next time, so you get that dopamine reward. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So people are learning how
Very
to like
interesting.
dopamine detox, like by sitting still for an hour, not doing anything, no stimulation.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Take some tyrosine.
Well, let's see. Tyrosine.
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Because I was going to do my own investigation, so I ordered a bunch of amino acids.
But does that also mean that the 3 of you help others produce dopamine, or that you yourself naturally produce a certain amount of dopamine
This
when
is this
that
question.
gate is being exercised?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
when it's being used. So when it's in a channel, as in, actually, do you have the channel as well? Or is
Yeah.
that-
Alpha,
Yeah, that's right. So both of you have the channel. But in your case, when it's being activated and somebody else comes along and they have that 7, right? And then do you produce more dopamine together?
Yeah.
Interesting question.
That would be.
So, but that's really an interesting one. Okay, so that was 31. So then 41, that's the start codon. We can see what Ra says about it, but we also have Richard Rudd, who that's in a codon ring by itself, because it only produces methionine, I think. Let me check. Yeah, it only produces methionine. And it's kind of double duty because it both starts and produces. And so, let me find methionine here. Oh, here we go. Ra has it, has a little mistake in the name. He calls it methadine. Isn't it methionine? I'm pretty sure. But anyway, that's in Keepers of the Wheel, gate 41. Which
It's methionine.
methionine. Thank you, methionine.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then when Ra has methadine, that's just a typo, because that's not even a real thing. I looked that up. So methionine, okay, methionine, and that's Keepers of the Wheel, which also includes 19, 60, and 61, which are all isoleucine. So methionine, though, is in a group all by itself. It's not even a group; it's just a single amino acid. So what Ra says is the 41st gate has an instrumental role in creating humans. It is the most human of all gates. In that humanness is the pressure and the foundation of the human experiential way. Well, yeah, this is we know that this is the source of the human experiential way, that this is such a driving force of evolution and of just going out there and going forth and multiplying and all of that, and going on migrations and all of the human experience things. So
Is your 41 hanging?
Yeah.
This is mine.
So he's really just saying it's just about staying alive to get the experience, and by the end you realize nobody really cares, and it's all, he has this kind of long soliloquy about how all 41 really is saying is like, if you survive to have the experience, that was it in itself. The experience was the goal. You're like, what does it all mean? The experience itself. You got to have the experience. You lived through it. So nobody else really cares. Only you get to really care that you got to live through it. At the end of the day, you're just having this experience. So he says, we're just here to be here. That's all. And that's what methionine is all about. Methionine, excuse me. And what is so exciting from his perspective in watching the mechanics in this life is that he knows that there's going to be a change, that there's a change coming. And so it's the change in the human experiential way, he's saying. So for him, it's basically just, it's very nihilist of him almost. He says it's leaving behind the essential animalness that makes life such a burden, entering into another state. That's where we're headed in the transformation of the human experiential way. But that's our program. Our program is experience until you die. and it's in every single one of us, and it starts every genetic sentence. It's always there. So this, you experience until you die, and you get the fuel to have new experiences, and that's what methionine is about. So let's see what it actually, what does it do in the body. It's an antioxidant that may help protect the body from damage caused by ionizing radiation. It may detoxify harmful substances, including heavy metals, in the body. So yeah, it's an essential amino acid.
And do you know the source of like food that has this amino acid?
The sources of food that are high in methionine.
Yeah.
Let's see if it says anything on here.
What did it say about intake there?
Oh, intake? Where did it say that? Recommended intake. Amino acids can be taken as single amino acids or amino acid combinations, part of multivitamins, proteins, and food supplements, tablets, fluids, and powders. You get all of the amino acids you need if you eat enough protein in your diet, and there are no conditions that increase how much methionine you need. So it's kind of just, that was just a very generic, health site. It aids in the breakdown of fats. It prevents their accumulation in the arteries. So it looks like it just does a bunch of good things. It supports healthy liver function, and it has a role in metabolism and oxidative stress. So yeah, I mean, it's in the root, so we would think it would have something to do with adrenaline or cortisol or things like that, but at least it has an antioxidant property, which is fighting against the free radicals that could be caused by stress. So, I mean, in a way, it is maybe, it somehow relates to, because we would expect it to relate to things of the root, cortisol and adrenaline and things like that.
Can you see which one glycine is related to? What gate?
Yeah.
Very
Glycine. Yeah, let's take a look. So glycine is gates 6, 40, 47, and 64. That's harmonia. And what Rudd calls the ring of alchemy. So that is glycine. So let's see what Ross says first. So that's in harmonia, and it's gates 60. It's gates 6, 40, 47, and 64. So I guess before we even look at that, we can just ask ourselves what these gates. I mean, these are kind of riddles. Like, why would these gates be together? What do these gates have in common, besides just being close to each other in the wheel? But even that gives the riddle. This is the riddle of the Godhead of harmonia. So it's the same thing, because it's the 4 gates of harmonia. So in some cases, the mystery of the Godhead is the same as the mystery of the amino acid. So in this case, it's this mystery of what does gate 6, which we know is the source of the emotional wave, and has to do with being open to bonding. Gate 40, which is, I guess, being alone, gate of being alone, and the gate of denial and saying no. Gate 47, that's really an interesting one. Oppression, but it's also about making sense of things and the aha moments that come to new realizations. And then 64, so here we actually have we have a channel. That's 6447, that gate of confusion, as the pressure to make sense of the images. So I guess it's saying relationships are confusing at a fundamental level, because we have all the confusion in the body graph in the same grouping as gate 6, which is the prerequisite for bonding. So it's also saying that 40, with its love of work and the freedom that one gets from having worked and being able to say no and have a boundary.
bargains.
Yeah, it is the gate of denial. It's the gate of even denying the need for partnership and love. So it's this kind of interesting, it shows that relationships are fundamentally about conflict, that gate 6 does have this aspect of it that is conflict, that there is.
And 40 is a provider.
The 40 can also be, it's right. It's the love of providing for the other. Look how much I do for you. But also, it's a great denier, and it's a denial of.
No, it's not.
Well, 40 is the denier. It's almost atheist in a way too. It's like the great denier of God. It says, "This is it," and so it's.
I'm just denying your claim because I have the 40.
Yeah, no,
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 it's not.
I got it. I got it. Yeah. So I guess it's just interesting what these things all have to do together and do with each other, and then being harmonia, the Godhead of harmonia. So we're looking for harmony in our relationships. We want our relationships to make sense, but really there's just such a confusion of images and the pressure to try to make sense out of them, and we're trying to solve the relationship, and you can't do that. That's not. I mean, but it's like the pitfalls are built into the program. That's what I love about human design, is that humans end up trying to do things that we're not supposed to do. And it's like you can't really point your finger and say, ha ha, because the program built it that way. It built relationships to have conflict and denial and rejection and confusion and all of these things. I guess not gate 49, but gate 49 is the kind of corollary to gate 40. It's the first no. There's a no on the way to gate 40, right? And that's the 49 no. And then the 40 is the second no. Because they're part of the same stream of sexuality, of tribal sexuality. So,
So I know that bone broth is really rich in glycine.
Bone broth is rich in glycine. Okay, so if you want to have a healthy relationship where you're feeling confused, you need some energy to process and to come to the realizations of gate 47. Not even really realizations. What would you call them? Just revelations.
Ahas.
Pull the veil back. Yeah, aha moments. Exactly. So here's what Ra has to say about it. It's surprising about the way in which human beings are programmed. If you look at the lower configuration, you have the 40th gate, which is one of the 3 gates of aloneness. It's the gate of denial. It says, I don't need you. It says, you only want me because you want me to work for you. And then you have this.
That gate like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, that gate 5 times. Okay, so. Yeah.
Wow.
I am always like, let's hang out. And you're like, you just want to record me.
But it's like unconscious, so.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And we're going to record. We're going to do a frequencies one day.
Yeah.
I'm going to do more of those. But now the 6th gate is not only the source of the emotional wave, it's the emotional motor. And it's open and closed in its capacity to intimacy. So it opens, it's available, it's not available. It's available, it's not available. So there's also the denial, again here, that it denies intimacy. It says no, it's closed. So there's 2 kind of ways of being closed. And then the 47th gate is a different configuration, but built into that is something very curious, which is the presence of the 6447. And it's a definition that's going to bring confusion about the past. It's here to make sense of the past. And it's here to be confused about what the hell happened? Where did it go wrong? What did it wants to review. It has a pressure to go over the different images and try to find the connective tissue. Because the images by themselves are kind of just disconnected. And there has to be some way to turn that into a story. And so it has a pressure to know and to make sense out of things. But what Ra says here is that making sense out of the past doesn't bring one a sense of comfort or stability, because making sense out of something is not a fact. That a fact would actually bring comfort and stability. A fact would have influence, as we saw. But making sense of the past is not a fact, it's a story. So it's a way to deal with the confusion, is what it is. And relationships begin with a readiness to deny being open to intimacy based on not understanding and not being clear about the past. So he makes this connection with gate 6 and its fundamentally relational way of being, that all relationships already have within them this confusion about the past, and even the question of the past. And well, you were married before, what does that mean? And do you still love this person? And is this person there? And we're kind of dragging our past with us into relationships. And there's all this confusion of how do you make sense of that, and how do you well, it even says there's even confusion about whether you should engage with anyone else at all. I mean, that there's a confusion over, should I just be alone? And gate 40 is right there going, you can be alone. Deny the need for anyone else in your life. Yeah. It's there to say, just imagine how nice it is just having your own space. Just there's that classic poem. It's called Love Poem by Richard Brodigan, and it says, it's so nice to wake up in a bed all alone and not tell someone you love them when you don't love them anymore. And that's the end of the poem. I mean, it's literally like the single definition, gate 40. Like,
Something I find is that like 37s and 3740s tend to irritate me because they're just like very pushy to like on the 40.
oh, the
It's really
37s are,
interesting.
they're like, I'll be affectionate. Let's
Yeah.
make a deal. Let's make a deal. And you're like, no, I haven't practiced this one. Yeah, a great denier. Well, and it's the great denier of God too, theoretically. So it's kind of there's that story David Foster Wallace told of the man who was caught in a snowstorm, and he was saved by two men who came to him and saved him. But before he was saved, he was about to die, and he said, "Please God, I'm praying to you. If you save me somehow, I will always believe in you." You know. And then these guys came and saved him, and then he was telling the story at the bar later, and they're like, "Well, you got to believe in God now. I mean, he totally saved you." The guy's like, "What? He didn't save me. I just saved by a couple guys." So it's like that's the denier. The denier can always deny. Like no amount of proof, whatever. It's like, "Please save my life," and then I'll always believe. And then it's like your life saved. Oh, you never. No, those guys came along. It's never. It can always deny. It's like it's the fundamental ability to deny. That's something else funny, that there's nothing that can make somebody stop denying. I mean, if that's what their role is to kind of say, there is some other explanation for this.
I think Ross said the voice got him through the 42.
Through the 40 line 2.
Line 2, yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was going to say that also in the mystic way, this is where it has to switch types of circuitry. That this is the last piece of tribal in the mystic way before it goes individual. So you kind of have to, the work of undoing like the animism, for instance, of the 1949 kind of is what. It's
kind of saying, I don't believe any of that junk. I don't believe any of those.
The they religion, the us religion, the tribe religion, you have to get rid of it and find that mysterious like inner religion or whatever with the 5125.
Right. The mystic way is this story of going from participation mystique with a group that all participates in the mystical rites together, but in a sort of hive mind, to the going your own path, inner journey, chapel perilous sort of thing of going through your own dark night of the soul and turning inward, being alone and being alienated from the tribe, leaving the tribe. And so that's what you're saying, is gate 40 is that turning point where it's the last bus stop. It's the last stop in town for the tribe.
Right.
The tribe ends there, and then the next gate in the mystical way, which is gate 51, begins the individual setting out on your own, jumping into the unknown, having the courage to leap into the void or go into the chapel perilous, to have the trials and tribulations to be tested, and ultimately to get to the promised land of universal love and the mystical higher love of the G Center, and then to the awakening of the 1020.
It's a Virgo gate too, which is interesting.
Gate
Love of
40?
work, and then it's Virgo, yeah.
Oh, love of work makes so
Right.
much sense
Yeah.
being Virgo. That's, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, here's another funny one. We think of the ego sometimes as loud and brash and stuff like that, but Ra actually says that the gate 40 is the soft-spoken ego. But it makes a threat, or it makes a bargain.
Yeah.
So it's like Clint Eastwood being like, "You sure you want to do that?"
Yeah.
Like, that's the gate 40. It's this kind of quiet ego voice. I like that.
Gate of the
description.
stomach.
The gate of the stomach, which is a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. There's where we get the saying. Yeah. Okay, so Ra was just saying of these gate 6, 40, 47, and 64, that relationships begin with a readiness to deny, 40, being open to intimacy, 6, based on not understanding and not being clear about the past, that 47, 64. That there's just some sort of need to come to clarity. In the same way that we have emotional clarity, all of the abstract circuitry needs time for things to come into focus, to become clear. They have to slowly, it's like there's a hangover period or something, and then you kind of realize what the weight of what has happened actually is. The past must be measured and weighed, or it must be digested in some way. So Ra says, this is still in glycine, that the first time you can have a relationship, there's a part of you that is always ready to deny that's based on something in your past. Oh, I don't think he means for the first time ever. I think he just means any new relationship. The first time you open to a new relationship with somebody, with them, it brings up the past. I think that's what he's trying to say here. That there is always confusion in you about whether or not you should engage with anyone else. And that is built into all of us. In other words, there's no such thing as a truly existential relationship. It doesn't exist. It really brings in everything else. And this is actually what psychoanalysis also shows us. There is no dual relation in the sense of two people that only exist as the two of them. The fantasy is to have two people that aren't interfered with by the outside world. But the outside world always interferes. There are always other people who are in the way, who are causing a problem, and then they can be scapegoated and blamed and kind of imagine if they weren't in the way, if my mother-in-law wasn't in the way, if my dad wasn't always on my case about this, if my neighbor wasn't this, if their coworker wasn't that. There's always some person that we can kind of blame and pretend if they weren't there that just you and the other person can have your perfect relationship, conflict-free, whatever. Doesn't happen. And that's what Ra is saying is built into this, is the relationship is meant to bring up the past, to be made sense of. It's meant for you to ask, how did I end up here and why did that happen? And it's meant to bring about your, I don't need this kind of
Why is this happening
denial.
to me again?
I mean, the gate 40 they call the gate of masturbation, and ultimately that a lot of people will say, I don't want a relationship, I'll take care of myself, and that's kind of their attitude about it, but they have to realize the relationship is about so much more than sex. It really is about companionship and about the dormant potentials that each person has that come to life when the two of them have that electromagnetic. That's really what the
Isn't it
relationship
also
is.
a lock right now in the gate 40?
Right, yeah, gate 40 is, well, it's a
Temple or
it's a key, yeah, so it is the temple,
Oh, it's
absolutely.
key. Oh, okay.
Right, because
That keeps
the
changing.
locks are kind of, the keys are changing, exactly. It's kind of a weird way of putting it. Normally you
Right.
think of changing the locks on the
Right.
but yeah, in the global psychoanalysis, gate 40 is the key to gate 46, the temple. And so what that means is just that we worship in the temple of our aloneness. It's kind of amazing how much you could even deconstruct like the VR world of like VR, experiences as this ultimate, I don't need anyone, I'll be by myself. And being in that aloneness and how it is something that is reserved for the elite. I mean, not everyone can afford VR, but getting that is kind of like, I can be out of aura, but I have all this experiential access. It's a really interesting thing. It's like the reward for all the hard work is ever more detailed entertainment. So even these TV shows and films that have huge budgets and have such intricate details and so much work put into them, that's work being put into entertainment. That's part of the bargain that the 40s struck in this era that says, I'll work hard in exchange for my reward. I get to be alone and I get to have my entertainment, and that is my temple, that is my church, that is where I'll worship. So I will worship alone in this church of entertainment. And how much that's become a reality of our time.
Yeah, wow.
Such an interesting way to deconstruct it.
Or even just being able to live alone is itself the ultimate privilege.
It's such a luxury. Being able to sleep alone is a
Yeah.
luxury. Being able to live alone is a luxury. I mean, these things are reserved for the select, very lucky few.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a really interesting codon ring. So let's see what Richard Rudd has to say about it. He calls it the ring of alchemy. He says, this very powerful genetic grouping known as the ring of alchemy plays a pivotal role in the transformation of the human species. Each of these 4 gates will transmute your DNA so that there is no longer any interference in your physical body. That's a weird way to put it. 6, 40, 47, and 64. Kind of a, what do you mean by interference? I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's an interesting idea. But it's a very powerful genetic grouping. The 6th, he calls it a gift. I guess the gift of the 6th gate is breaking down the barriers in human relationships. Yeah, that's for sure. The gift of the 40th gate is forging new openness into our communities. Interesting way to think about that. Forging openness in the community. I wouldn't necessarily...
Well, because if you're building, say, a structure for the community, it's creating a space that the community...
Maybe he's just thinking, he's thinking like a 9-center way too, like they're making a bargain. Like I can see how the 40-hour work week or the 5-day work week, things like that were kind of the 40 advocating on behalf of the community needing, I wouldn't necessarily think openness per se, but I could see where he's going with it. He's like,
Well, they have more time to socialize.
and he's kind of saying like 40s in this day and age need to be there to help the communities in some way, forging a new openness into communities, basically taking what the 6 has done and breaking down the barriers in human relationships. That's the new openness. That's what I wasn't connecting. So the 6 creates an openness where people were closed to each other by breaking down the barriers to intimacy. Then the 40 says, let's take this new friendship and put that into the community. So I guess there is that relationship between the 6 and the 40, and we know that they're both tribal. And then he says the 47th, the gift of the 47th gate is allowing us to transform our old ways. And for the 64, this is opening us up to a fresh set of possibilities for living in a new way. So I guess he sees it as having to do with the past, but also the pressure to, I mean, it is interesting to think of the head center as always bringing in something new. If it's bringing in pressure from the outside, but what is the outside? It's new. New things to think about, new things coming our way, I mean, I always think of it as the pressure of the old, like all the memories being the accumulated pressure bearing down on somebody. So I think that's also true, but in its openness to inspiration, there is definitely inspiration from the outside, and so it makes sense to me that someone can be inspired by a bunch of images that now they want to make sense of, like an artist getting a bunch of images and then wanting to turn it into something. So yeah, that's an interesting. I'm not against his interpretation. He's saying
Well,
that.
Isn't 47 related to 22 also? Are they related somehow?
They're opposite.
Opposite.
Opposition.
I was
Polarities.
thinking, because I have both. I have 47, and you think about oppression, like the way to deal with oppression is just to have grace about it. I mean, it kind of.
Well, that was something so funny that Alok said. And I think that's a beautiful way of using the keynote of that. What 22 is here to do is to be graceful. But then he had his own way of interpreting it where he said that 47s have really oppressive minds. And an oppressive mind is the worst oppressor of all. And they oppress themselves worst of all. But they go around oppressing others. And he said, what is oppression? Oppression is being forced to listen to someone who's trying to tell you what they know, and you don't want to hear what they know. It's like, it's this mind that's oppressing you. It's cornering you and telling you all the shit that they know. And so that's what the 47 can do. But what is its answer is 22, to have the social grace, to smile and nod and know that no matter how much they're tormenting you, they torment themselves 10 times worse because they can't turn it off. They have an oppressive mind that's constantly oppressing them with its thoughts of, I guess, needing to be certain about the story itself. It always reminds me of in Alice in Wonderland, she meets the Queen of Hearts, and the Queen of Hearts is constantly saying what the moral of things that are. And that's the moral. And the moral of that is, one in the hand is two in the bush. And the moral of that is don't count your chickens before they hatch. And the moral of that is, and then there's like some implosion where someone like asks her what the moral of having the moral is or something, and it kind of spirals off. But I mean, that's definitely part of it too, is the oppressive trying to be certain about what the moral of the story is. That's kind of a 47 thing, because you have all these images, what does it mean? And 47 is trying to be certain about what it actually means.
It's not logical.
It's not logical, so you can't really make sense of it, so you're kind of stuck in this. So did it happen because I did a bad thing, or did I do this wrong thing and that's why this happened to me? Or like there's got to be some karmic reason, or there's some lesson behind it, or moral behind it, or something to glean from it. So that can be really, really difficult. Yeah, and very oppressive. But yeah, I like this synthesis of this codon ring that Red did. I think it was an interesting story. I mean, it's like that itself is a 64-47 exercise. How do you take 4 different hexagrams, which are basically just images, and turn them into a story? And so for him, it was the 6 breaking down barriers to intimacy, the 40 instilling that in the community, the 47 basically finalizing and putting old issues to rest, so it could open up to the novelty of the 64. I like that interesting reversal. That it's not that the pressure of the 64 makes the 47 process happen, which we know is true, but the other way also, that the 47 puts the past to rest by saying, now we can finally conclude this. This is the story, this is what happened, we've written the book on it, we can close the book on it, put it away, and now we can be open to new images to come in
Right.
and openness to new inspiration. So that itself is kind of an interesting reversal of the usual movement from 64 to 47. Like he does it the other way around, which I'm pretty sure he's just telling the story in the order of the gates and the wheel, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's like there's a challenge there, because if he tells it from the 64 to the 47, it's the story of the images pressuring to make sense of. But
Right.
instead, it's now the story of the 47 finalizing the past to make room for something new to come out. And that's kind of an interesting reversal. I like how he does that.
Isn't he across the consciousness?
Is right across the consciousness?
I don't know. That would
Yeah, I'm not
surprise
sure.
me, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense
He
to me
seems
if
like
he
it,
is.
yeah.
I mean, he really is good at naming a bunch of stuff and conceptualizing it and organizing it and putting it into all the cubby holes. And I mean,
looking
it
out
wouldn't
the
surprise me.
roof or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Well, any other gates that we want to look at? I mean, this was a pretty fun exercise, just looking at what we have. We have the resources here. I have the Richard Rudd website here, where he just puts that all on his Codon ring page on Gene Keys, which is nice of him. He doesn't hide it behind payment anything. He just has it all as a reference material. And then I also have the Rave Codon mapping from Ra.
We're in isoleucine season, and a few months ago I found some patterns between leucine and isoleucine. So we could just look at, because I think those gates have relationships. It's called isoleucine because it resembles leucine.
Okay, yeah. So
that's
looking at
also
leucine
consistent.
and isoleucine together, or how they relate to each other. So let's see what we have there. Okay, well, that's a lot of gates. It's a lot of gates, yeah. It is. So leucine is 5 gates, and then isoleucine is another 3 gates. So that's definitely a lot to synthesize. Let's see what
Does that
Red.
mean
Yeah.
Does that mean we get more isoleucine at this time, or?
That's a whole other
I
question.
think that's kind of an open question. I don't think anyone really knows if
It's
it's as literal as that,
yeah,
but it might be.
supposedly somehow compelling the production of that.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly might be. Like, if we look at what these things produce, and certain ones produce more serotonin, and certain ones are used in dopamine, there very well might be certain times of year where we're as a whole producing more of one or the other of these. I mean, that's kind of. There are. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say how much of that actually happens, because we did leave behind mating season. We lost mating season as humans. We still have vestiges of mating season in the springtime, and we still have sort of a euphemism for mating season in the springtime of like spring fever and things like that. And even just in the actual wheel, you kind of see the story, and we have Valentine's Day and stuff like that. But there is no mating season. So it's a good question though. Like, are people still producing all of the pheromones and all of the kind of things of mating season as vestiges? Are they actually producing that? Are people dating more in certain times of year? Who knows? I mean, it's an interesting question. But
So
yeah.
Do you guys want a few patterns or a few
Yeah,
things I found?
yeah, I'd love to hear about it, please.
So one is that 61 and 60 are both isoleucine, and 24 and 3 are both leucine. So 61, 24, and 63 are isoleucine paired with leucine
Yeah.
to make those two individual.
So 61 and 24, and what was the other one?
60 to 3.
Okay, so really the two,
Not too
the top and the bottom individual.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really profound pair, to be leucine and isoleucine. That's like, that to me, those two channels together are kind of like the stitches at the top and bottom of the body graph or something. Like, there's kind of a,
Mystical mutation.
yeah, yeah.
Can I keep going?
Yes, please.
Sorry. And then also, leucine definitely is overrepresented by individual circuitry. We could look up if it's exclusive. And here's another funny pair, is that 3420 is asparagine to leucine, and so is 4323. So two of those guaranteed oppositional channels, and obviously right next to each other, so I guess that's why. But those are both asparagine to leucine.
So there must be a relationship between asparagine and leucine
But it's
together.
yeah, it's just funny to see leucine's presence in these very conspicuous channels, 6124, 63, 3420, and 4323 are all such.
Wow, these are very,
Power.
these are in that individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a really interesting observation of just, and even just a way of looking at the channels and to see what two amino acids work together in that channel, right? Because I guess the ways it would be interesting to look at the opposite amino acids, which are for the polarity, but it would also be interesting to look at the channel-based amino acid connections when they are different. I mean, in the case of 6447, they're the same, which we saw. So, but that would be so cool to kind of look at how different amino acids work together and what they build in tandem together, and then to look at that to do the channel association. I think that's another area of research of trying to understand
How those amino acids work
how they
together in the
relate.
body,
Yeah, because each gate can connect. It can connect via the channel or the polarity, or the next gate in the wheel. So that's another interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, well, some very, very interesting ways of going. So let's just see what Richard Rudd has to say, and then we can also see what Ra says about. Well, here's Ra on leucine. So leucine, he says there's a demand on any species that it is going to be mutative, that the possibility that mutation has to be embraced. So there are aspects within us that will always resist mutation, and there are aspects that are always open to mutation. So leucine is the nurturing force for mutation. And so he kind of talks about the sacral gates, the 42nd gate relates to the third gate, the 27th. This is quite long, and I don't think we'll be able to go through all this because it's quite a. I mean, I almost think each one of these really tells its own rich story, and especially when you have 7 or 8 gates, all being the same amino acid, we know that that's such an important thing. But what he's really saying is it's the nurturing force of mutation. So that's a big part of it.
That explains why they're all individual, right?
Yeah.
But they aren't all. There's also 27 and 42. But yeah, there's a lot of individuality. There is 20, 23, 24. Yeah, there's a lot of individuality. 3. So, but yeah, I mean, that's definitely, and then let's see what.
And then 6124 and 63, like, I do think about this as the most mystical kind of time of year, at least through December up until January and kind of the holiday season, you know.
Oh, and those gates are represented in the sun, yeah. Some of them anyway. So, yeah, so Ra calls, so Ra really is just describing it in terms of, he talks about it in terms of Janus and Maya and mutation. So that 27 is nourishing, and then we have 42 is new, and then 3 is also about bringing in new changes, and so this is nourishing new changes. Now going over to Rudd describes it as the ring of life and death. Anyone have any ideas why he might call this the ring of life and death? Yeah, quite a few gates in there. But yeah, nourishing new beginnings.
Would survive or not? It's kind of like mutation either survives or it doesn't. It keeps it keeps.
Well, and that right now death is the way of clearing the way for mutation too. So it's like the new life is the new mutation, and we kind of have to die to make way for something new to come along. At this point, one person can't just keep living and keep changing that. But yeah, that
Can
absolutely.
you read those gates again?
Yeah, so gate 3, gate 20, very existential gate of the now, 23, gate 24, so these individual returning, 27, nourishment and nurturing, and 42, which is all about the new, kind of bringing about new things.
So these are,
And that's the root.
they're in every organism except plants, but single cells have the 3, and then lizards and bugs and mammals have the 20.
Yeah. So do mammals too.
Plants. Oh, plants have a 34. But we're not looking at 34.
Yeah, there's no 34. So there's no plants in this. So this is
So plants don't care about leucine, but everything that we consider animate does.
So everything animated, has at least one of the gates of leucine.
So that's life and death, I guess.
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
interesting to
brings us
see.
life.
Yeah.
It would be interesting
Right,
to see if of all the forms, if every amino acid is represented in every form through one or the other gate. But I don't think it is because, for instance, methionine is 41, and we don't have. There's no 41 in mammals,
Right.
and that's the only one that does methionine. So it must just be assumed that those forms just have a consistent or steady or neutral supply of that.
It's not configurable, like you like to say.
Exactly, yeah. So the ring of life and death, let's see what Red says about this. The ring of life and death is a complex genetic codon group governing the many processes that bring human beings in and out of form. Wheeling in the cosmic forces of creation and destruction, this ring is based upon change and the continual mutation of life. In fact, in all cycles of physical cellular mutation, life is programmed to follow the archetypal processes represented by these 6 gates. So these 6 gates are the archetypal processes of life and death. So starting something new, nurturing, returning, I guess the structuring of 23 or explaining, which is kind of an interesting one. Like how does 23, I guess maybe it's just organizing it. Life is somehow organized. So yeah, there's some abstract way that these 6 gates all have to do with fundamental life processes. And it would be an interesting challenge to take them and try to keynote what those life processes are. To look in biology, what biologists call the fundamental life processes, like taking in new food, and I mean, I don't know if that's what he means by that, or what else, I guess maturation, it makes sense that something from the channel of maturation is in there because part of the life process is maturing, that something grows up and kind of develops adult characteristics. So I guess that is, it would be an interesting challenge to see, like, what does life need? And apparently these 6 gates represent the 6 constituents that life and death need. So Rudd continues, its secrets are revealed in the simple wisdom of the 4 noble truths and the eightfold path left by the Buddha. All life is change and is thus subject to cessation, and all truth lies in the awareness of the present moment. So gate 20 is in there. So there is this secret of gate 20 being at the end of the mystical way and what we realize at the end. And all that there ever really is to realize is the eternal now in that sense. Another message contained within the Ring of Life and Death is that the chaos of play is to be deeply trusted and revered. Play is the expression of genius, and genius always finds a new solution to the challenges it meets along the way. So that's a very positive kind of idea here, and I can get behind that as well, that it is playful, that something creative and mutative and bringing about something new is ultimately not just melancholy, it's actually the opposite of melancholy. The melancholy is when there is no mutation, when there is no change, and that the actual excitement of something new coming into the world is sort of that new thing playing with the world. In actor network theory from Bruno Latour, he coins the term actant and says how non-human actants can have so much more impact than human actants. For instance, a tornado can have an impact on a whole town, or a disease can have an impact on a whole family. So the actant is not necessarily human, it's something new that has come along and is interacting with, or I guess in this sense, playing with everything that is already there. So it's kind of an explanation for why when a meme comes along and then there's 20 versions of it, that's the way of taking that meme and having that meme itself play with the existing things that it can interact with in a creative way. It's not even that the individual is playing as much as the meme itself is playing.
That's good.
So yeah, that's interesting keynoting for it. The Ring of Life and Death, leucine. Yeah. Well, I think this is a lot for today. I mean, these are very deep topics, but I'd love to continue studying the codons, and I'm adding this codon feature on Signpost. So if you go on Signpost to HD, I can post the link in the main, but you'll be able to see what the codons are for the current transits, and then I'm going to add this Codon Explorer we just get to learn more about them and just kind of read about them.
That's
as we
great.
click through.
Wow. That's worth the price of admission. Right there.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I'm
Mike.
so
Yeah.
It's about
excited.
time
I'm so
somebody did that.
excited. I'm
Yeah,
so excited.
I'm working on it. Yeah, it's all influence. K31 influence.
You've
She
been
influenced me
lucky
with the
about
I didn't
facts.
even bug him. I just said that'd be cool, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great to have us to track her?
Yeah.
So I'm definitely. She influenced me with the facts. The facts are it's
Yeah.
not easy to track the amino acids right now, and it is easy to
Yeah,
build that
so
ability
true.
into
Yeah.
Look at it.
into
Yeah.
signposts. So we're doing it. Yeah, it's been a
People
lot
are
of fun.
hungry for this information.
Yeah,
Amino
no, I
acids,
think
all
so.
is
It's
a
really an
popular
interesting.
topic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, very interesting topic. Well, thank you all remotely for being there. If anyone has any final questions, comments, anything, otherwise I'll hope to see you all next time. This was a really fun, interesting topic, so thanks for joining on that. And yeah, maybe more soon.
Part 2 next week.
Part 2, exactly. There's a lot more to explore. So, all right, have a great one.